Imagine fighting a wildfire, not with giant helicopters, but with a swarm of intelligent, self-sacrificing drones. I know, it sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie, but it's actually a lot closer than you might think. We're about to dive into how this technology is completely rewriting the rules for emergency response, from what's happening today to the revolution that's coming tomorrow.
So let's start with the central life or death question. For first responders, getting close to a wildfire, an explosion site, or a collapsing sinkhole isn't just tricky. It can be an absolute death sentence. You're in a race against time where the very environment around you is the enemy. And the scale we're talking about here, it is just staggering. Take a look at this data from CAL FIRE. It shows the relentless reality. Thousands upon thousands of fires and tens of thousands of flight hours for pilots every single year. This is not once-in-a-while problem, it's a constant, brutal war against nature, and it proves we urgently need safer, smarter tools in our arsenal. So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll step into the danger zone to really understand the risks involved. Then, we'll see how drones are already giving us eyes above the chaos. After that, we'll get into the really futuristic stuff with the self-sacrificing swarm. And finally, we'll ask the big question: what does an automated future for emergency response really look like?
All right, first up, let's get a feel for the danger zone. And we're not just talking about difficult conditions here. We're talking about environments that are actively hostile to human life, where every single second counts, and one wrong move could be the difference between life and death. Human responders face this just absolute barrage of challenges. I mean, can you imagine trying to assess a pipeline near a sinkhole, standing on ground that could just give way at any moment? Or heading into a building after an explosion, knowing there could be secondary blasts or the whole thing could just collapse? These aren't just logistical hurdles, they're life-threatening conditions that delay the critical information needed to make life-saving decisions. And this is exactly where the first wave of drone technology is changing the game. Right now, today, drones are becoming our remote eyes, giving us the incredible superpower of seeing right into the heart of the chaos, all from a position of absolute safety.
And that, right there, is the core of their value. They completely separate the need for information from the risk of getting it. So instead of a firefighter being the first one on the scene, a drone can be, giving the command center a perfect, real-time picture without putting a single human life on the line.
So let me show you how this works in the real world with this case study from Arch Aerial. They had sinkholes threatening a pipeline, and sending a ground crew in was just not an option, way too dangerous. So instead, they flew daily drone missions. This gave them incredibly precise, real-time data on the sinkhole's growth, letting them assess the risk to the pipeline without putting a single person in danger.
But what happens when you need to watch a situation for hours or even days? Well, during a refinery fire exercise, they used a tethered drone. Because it's literally plugged into a power source on the ground, it can stay in the air pretty much indefinitely, providing this uninterrupted live feed. This isn't just a quick snapshot, it's a persistent bird's-eye view of the whole scene, which is a total game-changer for coordinating a long, complex response. And you can see just how versatile this tech is. It's not just about fires and sinkholes, not by a long shot. Drones are being fitted with special sensors to literally sniff out gas leaks, used to map hurricane damage in a fraction of the time it used to take, and even to monitor environmental compliance. They're quickly becoming the Swiss Army knife for remote monitoring. Okay, so monitoring from above is incredibly powerful. But what's next? This is where things get really interesting. We're shifting from drones as passive observers to active participants. Let's look at this radical new concept from researchers at NASA for fighting wildfires. I want you to meet the ABS drone. That stands for autonomous, biodegradable, and yes, self-sacrificing. The whole idea is to have a fleet, a swarm of these cheap, single-use drones. Their mission? Fly to a wildfire, and instead of dropping a payload of fire retardant, they crash themselves in a coordinated pattern to create a super precise fire break. It is a one-way trip, and that's the entire point.
Now, when you compare this to the traditional methods, it's just mind-blowing. On one hand, you've got manned air tankers. We're talking over $6,000 an hour, putting pilots in extreme danger and taking an average of 15 minutes just to show up. On the other hand, you have the ABS swarm. Zero human risk, deployed instantly from the ground with surgical precision. The difference is just night and day.
So let's just walk through how this would actually work. A fire gets detected. The first responders arrive on the scene. But instead of just carrying hoses, their truck is also a launch pad for a payload of ABS drones.
And then, within moments of arriving, the swarm is released. They take off all at once,
this coordinated fleet heading straight for the blaze, each one carrying its own payload of fire retardant. And they're not just flying blind here, no way. They're guided by satellite data, they have their own sensors, and they're all communicating with each other. They basically think as one, using their onboard AI to autonomously position themselves into a perfect strategic ring around the fire, getting ready to cut off its escape route.
And this is it, the final, heroic act. On command, they perform their one and only mission. They dive into the ground along that planned perimeter, sacrificing themselves to create a perfect, unbroken wall of fire retardant, stopping the blaze dead in its tracks.
And just to put this into perspective for you, it would only take about 14 of these small drones to deliver the same amount of fire retardant as one small tanker aircraft. But here's the key. Instead of one big, messy drop from high up, you get 14 incredibly precise, targeted impacts right where they're needed the most.
Now, this whole concept is incredible, but it's really just one piece of a much, much bigger puzzle. To make this a reality, we have to think beyond just the swarm and look at the technology that's needed for a truly automated future.
You can see this really clear progression. We are here today in the remote monitoring phase. The AbSwarm, that represents the near future of active intervention. But the ultimate vision? It's a fully automated system. A satellite detects a fire, a drone swarm is launched, and the fire is suppressed, all before a human is even aware that it started.
And of course, the researchers have already thought about the obvious problems, like if you're crashing a bunch of drones in a forest, what about all the waste? Well, they're exploring biodegradable bodies made from mycelium, which is basically fungus. What about the batteries exploding in a fire? The solution there is water-based lithium-ion batteries that literally can't burst into flames. So this isn't just some cool idea, it's a deeply considered sustainable system.
And at the end of the day, this is the whole point. Every single piece of this technology, from the little sensors to the swarm AI, it all serves one fundamental goal: to save human lives by letting machines do the jobs that are just too dangerous for people.
Which leaves us with this final question. We've seen the incredible potential for firefighting, but as this technology gets smarter, cheaper, and more capable, where do we draw the line? What other dangerous, dirty, and difficult jobs that we currently ask people to risk their lives for could one day be done entirely by machines?